Richard Bennett stepped out of an expensive restaurant on Park Avenue, straightened his tie, and smiled to himself. A wintry Manhattan evening glittered in the shopfront reflections. Wet cobblestones stretched out ribbons of car lights. The deal was closed, a $2 million contract signed, partners thrilled. At the curb, a black Escalade blinked its headlights. The driver sat upright, hands on the wheel. In a paper bag, Richard carried half a prime steak and a few slices of baguette. The dog will love it, he thought. Spare some change, please, came a hoarse whisper from the side. An elderly woman sat at the steps. A patched coat, a knit cap, thin bluish fingers cupped together. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken yet attentive. No brazenness in them, only a careful, shamed watchfulness, as if she feared stealing anyone's time. I don't have cash, Richard tossed over his shoulder, already moving past. Not money, just a piece of bread, she said quietly. I haven't eaten in 3 days. Maybe the restaurant has leftovers. He paused for a fraction of a second, glancing at the bag in his hand. Leftovers, echoed inside him. Irritation flicked on like a switch. There are shelters, social services. Go there. I don't owe you anything. I'm not a beggar, the woman lifted her eyes, a scrap of dignity in her voice. My son is in the hospital. Everything went to his treatment. I have nothing left. Not even for bread. Stories, he waved her off. Everyone says that. Then they buy liquor. The Escalade door thumped shut. The SUV slid into traffic. In the rearview mirror, Richard caught one more glimpse of the woman covering her face with her hands, trying to hide tears from the neon glare. Sir. The driver ventured carefully. Maybe we should go back. You were taking that food to the dog anyway. Eyes on the road, Mark, Richard cut him off. Home smelled of a pricey vanilla candle. Elaine, impeccable as always, silk robe, sleek hair, a hint of fine perfume, kissed his cheek. How was it? 2 million closed. Perfect. So we can move on that villa in Miami. We can, he said curtly and walked into the living room. Their German Shepherd Duke lounged on the sofa like a monarch. Dinner, buddy. Richard emptied steak and bread into the dog's bowl. Duke sniffed and padded away. Picky, Richard snorted. But sleep never came. The phrase 3 days without food kept looping in his head. The city hummed outside. Inside him, a hollow rang. The next morning, driving down Park Avenue, he didn't know why he heard himself say, "Pull over." The old woman lay curled on the cold stone like a small bird in bad weather. He crouched down. Are you okay? Still alive. Her lips barely moved. Nowhere to go. I gave up my room to pay for my son's meds. I sleep here. A sharp jab pierced his chest, not pity, exactly, but a metal nail scraping metal. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a few large bills. Please, take this. Get food. Find a room for a week. God bless you, son, she whispered, pressing the money to her chest. At the office, his secretary recited meetings, but the words breezed past like a draft in a hallway. At lunch, he said to the driver, "To Bellevue Hospital." Bleach, hushed voices, ICU doors breathing open and shut. At the desk, he asked, "Do you have a patient named Daniel Johnson?" "We do," the nurse said, wearily straightening her badge. "Industrial accident. Multiple injuries. He'll need another surgery. It's expensive." "How much?" "The surgery, ICU, meds, likely around $120,000 more. Without it, the prognosis is poor." 120,000. Yesterday he'd signed 2 million and hardly felt the weight of the number. Here, a human life hung on one. Richard stepped out into the cold and, for the first time, understood that he knew how to move money, and that this time it would actually matter. That evening, in his study overlooking Midtown, he opened his laptop and keyed in the payment. Bellevue Hospital Foundation, memo, for treatment of Daniel Johnson. He confirmed the transfer. His finger trembled, not from doubt, but from unfamiliar importance. The next morning the woman wasn't at the restaurant. He asked the security guard. The elderly lady who sat here, did you see her? EMTs took her this morning. Looked bad. At Bellevue they told him, patient Mary Johnson, a heart attack brought on by starvation and stress. They let him into the intensive care unit as family. He didn't argue. Right now the word son felt more accurate than any formality. She lay there, almost translucent. Beside her sat a young woman in a puffer jacket, fingers locked white around a phone. I'm Daniel's wife, Rachel, she said. She hasn't been eating. She saved everything for Dan. And this morning the hospital called. Someone paid for his surgery. She cried with relief, and her heart just gave out. Richard's throat went dry. Mary opened her eyes. You gave me money yesterday. And today they said Dan's surgery is covered. Do you know who did it? I did, he exhaled. Mary smiled, thin, careful, and tears welled in the corners of her eyes. God bless you, son. How can I ever thank you? You already did, he said, moving closer. Yesterday I walked past you with a bag of food, for my dog, and wouldn't give you bread. I didn't sleep all night. I realized I'd let money harden me. Today, I wanted to fix that. Not with a tip, with something that matters. The old woman lifted a dry, warm hand and awkwardly smoothed his hair the way people touch their own when words fall short. You're a good man. You just forgot. Now you remembered. He left the hospital a different person. The Manhattan air smelled somehow cleaner. The driver said nothing as he turned up the heat. Richard felt warm anyway. That evening Elaine talked about a new collection in Soho and an absolutely perfect blazer. He listened and, to his own surprise, said calmly, Tomorrow I'm setting up a foundation. We'll help people who fall between the cracks, the ones told at the pharmacy no money, and at the hospital no coverage. A foundation? She said, genuinely surprised. You always said charity is for people with too much time. I was wrong, he replied simply. 2 days later he was on his knees at her door, at a chipped entrance to a half-basement studio in Astoria, Queens, where Mary had rented a room for a week. He knocked like a stranger. She opened in the same coat but with a clean scarf. He sank to the wet doormat. Forgive me. Not for money, for yesterday. For walking by. Thank you for the lesson I should have learned long ago. A neighbor peeked across the hall and gasped, but Mary just shook her head and gently lifted him by the elbow. Get up, son. Don't kneel to me. Live and help. The foundation came together with surprising speed. He held the first report the way he once held a $2 million contract, only now his fingers trembled not with excitement but with meaning. They funded surgeries for children and seniors, bought monitors for a city ICU, paid for rooms for people between the hospital and the street. In Richard's office, between his diploma and a photo from a business center opening, hung a new picture. Mary Johnson and her son Daniel, smiling after discharge. Beneath the frame he'd written by hand, Remember, real happiness is in giving. Sometimes at night he still drifted to the window, an old habit. But now, looking at the lights, he heard not emptiness, but the soft murmur of many lives for whom his money had become air. When someone asked what had happened to him, he answered without pretense. One night I refused to give an old woman a piece of bread. It turned out to be the most expensive lesson of my life, and the most valuable.